Have you ever wondered what led to the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008? The answer lies in a series of events that started innocently enough, with a housing boom that seemed like a golden age for homeowners and investors alike. Imagine a time when the economy was booming and money seemed to be flowing like water. The housing market was on fire, with prices soaring and demand skyrocketing. This was the era of the subprime mortgage, a risky type of loan that was handed out to borrowers with less than perfect credit scores. These loans were like a double-edged sword. On one hand, they made home ownership possible for many who might not have qualified for traditional mortgages. On the other hand, they were incredibly risky, teetering on the brink of default. As the housing market heated up, lenders started to loosen their standards. Subprime mortgages, once a small fraction of the market, started to proliferate. They were bundled into complex financial products, sold and resold, creating a web of debt that spanned the globe. But here's the catch. These subprime mortgages were like time bombs waiting to explode. They were typically adjustable rate mortgages, which meant that after a few years of low teaser interest rates, the rates would skyrocket. Many borrowers, seduced by the initial low payments, found themselves unable to keep up when the rates adjusted upward. The stage was set. The housing boom, fueled by these risky subprime mortgages, was not sustainable. It was a bubble, and like all bubbles, it was destined to burst. All it needed was a trigger, a catalyst to set off a chain reaction of defaults and foreclosures. As the number of these unstable loans grew, it became clear that the housing market was built on a shaky foundation. The economy was like a house of cards, vulnerable and unstable, ready to collapse at the slightest disturbance. The stage was set for the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. As these unstable loans grew in number, the first domino was poised to fall. The first domino fell with the burst of the housing bubble. This marked the onset of the subprime mortgage crisis. Let's take a moment to understand what exactly transpired. In the early 2000s, banks began to lend money to people who were considered high-risk borrowers. These were called subprime mortgages. Driven by the promise of home ownership, many individuals jumped at the opportunity, leading to an unparalleled housing boom. However, the party wouldn't last forever. As adjustable interest rates started to rise, many homeowners found themselves unable to keep up with their mortgage payments. This led to a surge in defaults and foreclosures, causing housing prices to plummet. Banks and financial institutions, which were heavily invested in these subprime mortgages, began to incur massive losses. The housing bubble had burst, and the fallout was catastrophic. The world soon found itself in the throes of a financial meltdown. Banks, laden with bad debts and worthless assets, teetered on the brink of collapse. The ripple effects were felt far and wide, shaking the very foundation of the global economy. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. The collapse of the housing market was the chink in the armor that revealed an entire system fraught with systemic risks and flawed financial practices. What followed was a cascading series of events that would go down in history as one of the most severe economic crises the world had ever seen. The collapse of the housing market was just the beginning. The fall of major financial institutions marked the intensification of the crisis. Imagine a colossal iceberg, with most of its mass hidden beneath the surface. That's what the financial institutions were like, carrying immense risks hidden beneath a facade of stability. When the subprime mortgage crisis hit, it was like an unexpected iceberg, piercing the hull of the seemingly unsinkable titans of finance. Institutions like Lehman Brothers, once a paragon of Wall Street, found themselves on shaky ground. The housing bubble had burst, and they were left holding the bag, filled with worthless subprime mortgages. Unable to cover their losses, Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy in September 2008, triggering a domino effect that would reverberate through the global banking system. This was not an isolated incident. Other financial giants, from Bear Stearns to Merrill Lynch, were teetering on the edge of collapse. Their failure sent shockwaves through the global economy, causing panic among investors and consumers alike. Banks stopped lending to each other, fearing the hidden risks their counterparts might be carrying. This led to a liquidity crisis, starving the global economy of much-needed capital. In a world interconnected by finance, the collapse of these institutions didn't just affect Wall Street. It sent ripples across oceans, affecting economies from Tokyo to London, Beijing to Sydney. The fall of these giants was a stark reminder of our global interdependence and the fragility of our financial systems. With financial institutions in freefall, trust began to erode. As trust evaporated, the credit markets froze. This phrase perfectly encapsulates the chilling reality of what happened next in the global financial crisis. Imagine a river, its flow representing the constant exchange of credit, loans, and trust between banks and other financial institutions. Suddenly, this river turns into a block of ice. That's what happened to the credit markets. Financial institutions, once confident and free with their lending, became wary. The trust that once lubricated these transactions evaporated, and the gears of the credit markets seized up. Banks stopped lending to each other, fearful of the hidden risks that might be lurking in their partners' balance sheets. This freeze in credit markets led to a drastic credit crunch. Lending, the lifeblood of economies, was sharply curtailed. Businesses couldn't get loans to expand or even maintain their operations. Consumers found their access to credit cards and mortgages severely limited. This lack of liquidity meant that the wheels of the global economy ground to a halt. Governments worldwide scrambled to stabilize the economy. As the world teetered on the brink of financial chaos, central banks and governments stepped into the fray. They unleashed an arsenal of tools to quell the financial storm. In the United States, the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates to nearly zero, flooding the economy with cheap money. It also launched an unprecedented program of quantitative easing, buying up trillions of dollars in government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Similarly, governments across Europe, Asia, and beyond unveiled massive stimulus packages. These were designed not just to rescue banks, but also to jumpstart economic growth and stave off a deep and prolonged recession. In addition, many governments took the drastic step of nationalizing failing banks, taking them into public ownership in a bid to restore confidence and stability. While governments tried to stem the tide, the impact on Main Street was already being felt. Businesses shuttered, unemployment soared, and ordinary citizens felt the pinch. The global financial crisis wasn't just a story of Wall Street tycoons and government bailouts. It was also a tale of mom-and-pop stores closing their doors, of families losing their homes, and of life savings evaporating into thin air. Imagine walking down your local Main Street and seeing closed signs hanging in shop windows, once bustling establishments now ominously silent. The ripple effects of the crisis reached far and wide, crippling businesses both large and small. Unemployment rates shot up as companies struggling to stay afloat were forced to let go of their hard-working employees. But the impact didn't stop at the business level. It seeped into the lives of ordinary citizens around the globe. People who had nothing to do with subprime mortgages or credit default swaps found themselves grappling with the harsh realities of an economic meltdown. Savings intended for college tuitions, retirement plans, or dream vacations were suddenly at risk. The financial security that many had worked their entire lives to build was now on shaky ground. The global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 was a harsh reminder of how interconnected our world truly is. A crisis that started in the housing markets of the United States soon spread like wildfire, leaving a trail of economic devastation in its wake. As people struggled, the stock markets took a nosedive. Stock markets around the world plummeted, adding to the panic and uncertainty. Imagine the world's most influential stock markets, from Wall Street to the Nikkei, witnessing a freefall. This was not a regional crisis, it was a global catastrophe. The magnitude of the drop was staggering. Picture market indexes falling, not in single digits, but by double-digit percentages. This was a scene reminiscent of the Great Depression of the 1930s, and it sent shockwaves through the global financial system. Investors, gripped by panic, were scrambling to offload their shares. The words bear market were on everyone's lips. This was a time when the bull was nowhere to be found, and the bear reigned supreme. As the markets crashed, retirement savings, college funds, and life savings were wiped out, leaving millions in financial ruin. The world's economic landscape was forever changed. In the face of such a disaster, it was time to learn and adapt. The crisis served as a wake-up call, prompting reforms and regulations. The world recognized the need for stronger oversight and risk management in financial institutions. Stricter regulations were implemented to ensure safer lending practices and to bolster the resilience of the banking system. Consumer protection was heightened to avoid predatory lending. These actions were taken with the hope of preventing a similar crisis. The global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008, a sobering reminder of the interconnectedness of global economies and the importance of financial responsibility.